Welcome, everyone. Today, we're unpacking something truly mind-bending together. We're going to explore the underlying architectural rules of the universe itself through a framework known as Infinity Omega, or the Sovereign Psi Engine. So, if you've ever wondered how abstract mathematical concepts actually translate into the physical boundaries of reality, like how the universe keeps itself from just flying apart into infinite chaos, well, you are in the right place. We're going to visualize some incredibly complex, absolutely beautiful systems today.
Okay, let's dive into this intellectual roadmap we've got laid out. We'll start off with the language of shapes, then we'll move into warping space with the curvature law, check out the refractive glass basin, and wrap it all up with the tricolor principle of flow. It's going to be quite the journey, moving from basic geometry right up to human perspective.
So part 1, the language of shapes, going from a single point to a perfect circle.
Now, what we're looking at here is a foundational rule of this architecture. It shows us how adding complexity to a system doesn't actually lead to chaos. It literally leads us directly toward ultimate unity. Think about it. Everything begins at step 1, the point, dimension 0. It has a position, sure, but absolutely no length. It simply is. But as we add lines and complexity, watch what happens. We jump to the triangle, the very first stable geometric structure, which gives us the creation of a plane. Add another line for the square, and we achieve balance, order, and foundation. We can keep going, past the pentagon and the golden ratio, right to the hexagon, which, we recognize as nature's absolute favorite pattern for pure efficiency. And as we keep adding sides, moving to an n-gon, the edges start to smooth out. More lines mean more sides, and more sides mean more symmetry. So we're systematically building complexity, but instead of things getting messier, the shape is just getting smoother and much more refined.
Now, what's really interesting about this is what happens at the absolute limit. When you add infinite lines, you don't get some infinitely massive, jagged mess. You get step infinity, the perfect circle. And this brilliantly illustrates that in this framework, infinity is not some boundless, chaotic void or an open-ended line just going nowhere. No, infinity is a perfect circle. It's wholeness. It is the ultimate unity where infinite symmetry literally collapses back into a single perfect form. It's just a gorgeous concept, right? Moving from limitation to total perfection.
So we've established this really beautiful mathematical journey from a zero-dimensional point to an infinitely symmetrical circle. But, well, math on its own is just abstract code. The real magic happens when we ask, how does this geometric language physically manifest? Like, how do these abstract shapes actually build the physical boundaries of the universe we live in?
Which brings us to part 2. Warping space through the curvature law, where motion literally generates reality.
This is where we get to learn about the engine's heartbeat, and specifically the exact mechanism that prevents the universe from infinitely expanding and basically tearing itself apart. Notice the equation here. K is proportional to the Laplacian of h. I know, that looks like heavy calculus, but let's demystify it really quick, because the underlying concept is just incredibly elegant. In very simple terms, mathematical flux generates physical curvature. The h here represents the master operator. You can think of it as the mathematical heartbeat, or the core engine driving the whole system. And the k is physical curvature. What this law essentially dictates is that the equations of this system don't just sit there quietly describing reality on a chalkboard. The mathematical motion actually physically warps space-time.
Let's walk through how this actually builds in physical space. On the left side, you'll notice a flat isometric plane. That's step 1, the mathematical flux just kind of doing its thing. But because of that curvature law we just talked about, that mathematical influence pushes down. Moving to the middle, you can see the plane dynamically bending downward, warping itself into a gravity well. But it doesn't just stop there. If it kept stretching forever, it would tear, right? Instead, look at the third step on the far right. The funnel folds entirely back on itself. It creates this closed, translucent geometric basin. That abstract mathematical code has literally translated into a physical boundary, structurally preventing unbounded, chaotic expansion and safely trapping the state vector inside.
And that leads us perfectly into section 3, the refractive glass basin that actually contains the cosmos.
So, we've just seen how space warps and folds back on itself, creating this geometric container known as the mother space. Notice that thick, green, glass-like edge. Because the curvature folded back on itself, the universe is now contained within this refractive boundary. And to be clear, this isn't the hard brick wall. It's a dynamic refractive medium. This geometric basin is exactly what catches the recursive evolution of the universe and forces it to cycle back. It completely ensures the system remains self-centered. It survives through an eternal self-correcting loop rather than just bleeding out into absolute nothingness.
All right, so we now have a really solid grasp of the objective cosmic structures, right? The perfect circles, the warped space, the refractive glass boundary. But science isn't just about the container itself. It's about the observer. What happens when we, the observers, actually look at this bounded reality from the inside versus the outside?
Let's explore that in Section 4, the tricolor principle of flow and perspective rotation.
I want you to mentally put yourself directly inside that geometric basin we just built. The tricolor principle basically argues that the underlying mathematical reality is completely invariant, meaning it does not change. However, how that reality physically manifests to an observer depends entirely on their orientation. Try to imagine taking your viewpoint and literally flipping it 180 degrees across that green glass boundary we saw earlier. The math driving the system is exactly the same, but the visual reality you experience, it completely flips.
Let's break down these three distinct zones clearly, because every single cosmic structure in this model contains all three simultaneously. First up, we have the white zone, or outflow. This is emission, expansion. It's basically what you see when you view the system from the inside looking out. To us, it looks like a massive explosion of light and energy. Second, we have the black zone, or inflow. This is absorption, contraction, convergence. This is the view from the outside looking in, where everything seems to be pulled down into a singularity. And third is the gray zone, or transition. This is that literal edge of the glass we were talking about earlier. It is the exact dynamic boundary where the system folds back on itself, and the directional flow flips a full 180 degrees.
So, the crucial point here is this. Think about the bright, explosive white light on one side and the dark, consuming vortex on the other. In traditional astrophysics, we might think of these as two completely different, totally unrelated phenomena. But under the rules of the sovereign psi engine, a white hole and a black hole are mathematically the exact same object. They're literally just the same flow of energy being viewed from opposite sides of that gray transition zone. If you stand on the inside, you see the brilliant emergence of the white outflow. If you step outside the boundary and look back in, you see the dark absorption of the black inflow. It's the exact same reality, just a completely different perspective.
We've really covered a lot of ground today. We've gone from the journey of a single zero-dimensional point evolving into the infinite symmetry of a perfect circle. We've seen exactly how that mathematical flux literally bends space into a refractive, protective basin. And we've realized that the most terrifying and beautiful cosmic structures in the universe might just be the exact same engine, simply viewed from different sides of the glass. Which leaves us with this final thrilling question to ponder. Is the universe simply a matter of perspective? Is it just an eternal system continuously looking back at its own perfect, recursive architecture? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this journey has sparked a massive amount of curiosity for you today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next one.